Hi there, it's Mark back with another Lightroom tutorial, and over the past few videos there's been a bit of a running theme to do with tones and editing tones. It started with this video where we looked at the basic sliders, where we had whites, where we had highlights, where we had blacks and shadows, and we realized that these really overlap. And was that an issue? Generally no, but could be. An example here, we've got an even spread of tones, black to white, and just by moving the highlight slider it kind of impacted 3 bands. These are arbitrary bands, I could have made it 64 or whatever, but 3 bands, you could argue 4 if you look from the original and down. But the white slider, which is higher again up the luminance spectrum, actually managed to penetrate all the way down to the left. And we found the same thing from blacks and shadows going the other way. So we thought, how can we be more precise? So then we looked at luminosity ranges. Now with luminosity ranges, it allowed us to target any tone, and we chose this one on this particular slide, and we showed how we could change it to extreme, such as here. Or even, because this is now a mask we're talking about, and not just tones, it's a mask, we could even do things like color it. Those 2 videos are linked down below in the description. We also then went on, isn't that some sort of food? We also went on to look at color range masking, which is similar to luminosity range. You're using a feature of a tone or a color to define your mask, not an object such as sky. So with color, we also realized that the perception of color changes with tones. For example, the green on the right hand side here versus the green on the left, they are identical, but our perception is that one is brighter, one is bolder, because the relative appearance next to it, black or white. And some colors were impacted more than others when you change the tones. Today we're going to continue that journey by looking at the tone curve. It's probably one of the lesser used features of Lightroom, but it is very powerful. You can get away without using it. There's plenty of other sliders to do the thing. In fact, there's lots of different ways to do things in both Photoshop and Lightroom to get the same end. But the tone curve has some particular features which make it very, very useful to use, particularly in softening and blending things, which we'll have a look at. There are 2 main tone curves. There's the parametric and a linear, and then we have color variants of the linear. We'll cover all of these and how best to use it, and we'll be using these 3 pictures which are waiting for you in a zip file on my website, and the link as usual is down below. We'll work through these pictures and we'll be applying different tips and techniques of using the tone curve, which you will see, as with many things in Lightroom, really comes into its own when you use it in masking. So you're using the superb masking features in Lightroom to target what you want, and then you're applying your edits within that. If that's something that you would like to see, stick around. 8 seconds time, when the titles are finished, we'll roll our sleeves up. You will have pressed pause, collected the files we're going to work on so you can play them at the same time. Perhaps even, to be encouraged, give this video a like, thumbs up, click on subscribe, ring that bell to be notified of future videos, and yeah, let's get cracking. Here are the titles. Okay, diving straight in, this is our first picture. Before we actually look at specific edits on this, I want to say more about the tone curve in general, just to set us up and to correct something I said in the introduction, which is I called this the linear curve. It's not. It is currently showing a linear line, but it is in fact called the point curve. This one here is the parametric, and this one is the point curve. The point curve is so called because you can click on it and add little points, and each of those becomes your adjustment point, for want of a better description. So I can move this up and down like so, and it's not cascading as much into the other points. Let's right click and reset it all. If I click in the middle and bring this down, you can see how between the adjacent points, which are maximums in this case, it maintains a curve. That's where I think it gets its name from. But I like that feature because this is what I mentioned when I said it helps blend. I think a better word would be feather. So I'm taking the mid-tones down here, but also dragging with it in an ever decreasing amount is darks, shadows, highlights and whites. That curve, that bow, is what makes this a really good tool for softening changes in because it blends them out. Of course, if you don't want it to blend that out, we can put anchor points in, and now the curve will largely stay within those points. I say largely because I'm now going to exaggerate this, and if you watch what happens to this segment here, it still brings that S type shape in as you move up and down. One way to fix that would be to put more anchor points in, and now it has less wriggle room literally beyond those. Anyway, right click, reset. So this is the point curve currently showing a linear line. So this picture here is a bit of a close-up of here, and it's to remind us of how this is spread out. So left to right across the tone curve is from dark to bright. Now I've got a number of columns here. It's actually infinite. It's an actual gradient all the way across. It's not banded, but I think seeing it like this helps visualize and cement the fact that darks are on the left and whites are on the right. And if we push the curve up, we're going lighter, and if we push the curve down, we're going darker. The top 2 points are quite special. That's where we can set our white point, so increase our white point or decrease it, or increase our black point or decrease it. We'll come across those as we go on, but just because they're tucked in the corner, I guess the message is they are valid points that you can move around. They're not just anchors into that corner. Let's get back to this picture. Now the curve is overreactive. Small changes make big changes to your picture. So as I've demonstrated before, but worth a recap, is if we hold down our Option key on a Mac or Alt key on a PC, while I'm doing this up and down, I'll try and maintain the same pace. Pressing it now, the mouse still moves, but the curve is not moving so much. It's as if it's had its brakes applied, it's being dampened, and that is one good way to control the changes you make to the curve. Bear that in mind as we go through. I probably won't mention that one again. Right click, reset. Another way of maintaining control is to use your arrow keys to make the changes. So watch what happens when I put a point on this curve. My cursor changes to a horizontal line with an up and down arrow. Down arrow brings the curve down, up arrow takes the curve up. Now that's no great advantage over the previous method, except when you might be in a scenario where, for whatever reason on your picture, you've got a quite complex set of tonal requirements that you want to just slowly nudge in, and sometimes the mouse, as you can see when I leave my mouse, can be a bit jerky, but if I just hover over and just press my down arrow, I've got complete control just over the relaxing of your use of the mouse. Now it's rare, I would think, that you're in that situation, but notwithstanding that, if you're not a mousy type and you prefer the absolute precision of using incremental steps using your arrow keys, then that is a technique for you. Reset all channels. So I've got a question for you now. What tone is that? Let's say you want to darken that. What tone is it? Is it in a shadow, a highlight? Well, this is where the next part of this tool comes into it. You don't even need to know or care. By clicking on this little tool here, my cursor changes to an up and down. So if I hover over that and click, it's put a point on for me. and if I wanted to do something about the highlights here, you can see where they are. If I move my cursor around, you can actually track the dot over here as I move around. So I put it there, which seems to be a very bright bit. Okay, so they're bits I want to address. So the highlight is really tucked in the corner. It's a bit difficult. So look, my mouse is hovered close, so I can now use my down arrow to give me great precision in bringing that highlight down. And you can see it's taking a little bit of the shine off the sails. And this particular tone I wanted to change, well, let's hover over that and let's brighten that a little bit. All the while it's maintaining this nice feathering effect by virtue of the fact it is a curve. Again, if we didn't really want it to be feathered, we could put another point in, for example, there, and we could just move that one up just to straighten that out just a little bit more. So this tool here is really, really useful. It's a bit like picking colours with some of the other tools. You needn't know what colour it is. You can go and sample, and that's what we're doing here, sampling. Okay, so we've learned a lot about the tone curve tool, that it's from black to white. We can move up to lighten and darken. We've got points we can put in to control things. We can sample things. And to a degree, that's all very straightforward. The classic way of adding contrast to something is to increase the darks and decrease the lights. Down here, we've got some predefined curves. It currently says custom because I've actually changed this, but we've got a medium contrast, which you can see is bringing the darks down and taking the brights up, a slight S. We've got a strong contrast, which exaggerates that a little bit more. And let's say that that is a particular look we wanted and use time and time again. It's awful. I don't care. But we could come in here and we could actually save that as awful. Save. And now on, let's change to a picture. Here we can go and we can pick out awful. So once you find a recipe you particularly like, you can actually save that. All right, let's reset everything again. One last thing before we move on to the pictures and start doing some proper editing is the parametric curve. Now, as I hover over, you will see the shadow, there's like a lozenge around the shadows, and if I move up, the darks, which overlaps a lot, then the lights, and then the highlights, they are what binds the adjustment to the range. So if I go down here in the shadows and I wriggle my slider back and forth as much as I like, if you look at the actual tone curve itself here rather than the picture, which obviously the extremes look awful, you'll see that it's bound within that lozenge. So this is the same for darks, although darks is a bigger lozenge, and the same for lights, and indeed the same for highlights. Now, we mentioned highlights before on the previous example. What if I really wanted to work on the highlights here? Well, I can change that lozenge. I can actually slide this over, which says I've now constrained my highlights to this area here. Okay, it feathers out, but it's much smaller. So if I alter the highlights now, I'm more likely to just hit the sails and the beams on the top of St James's Park, which is true. If I'd slid it the other way, the highlights will cover a lot more, and you can see it's coming into the buildings as well. So this is very useful too. You can define the scale and the range of each of the highlights, lights, darks and shadows, something you can't do with the predefined bands of highlights, shadows, whites and blacks, which are in the basic panel. Here, using the parametric tone curve, we can actually define those, and that in itself can be very useful as well. You've still got this picker, so we can go up there and we can put this on that grey and drag that down, and we'll find that that's actually in the darks and bring it down. I've still got the picker and come back in here and bring that down. I can take some of the lightness, some of the darkness, sorry, out of the bottom of the tree by moving that up like that. So again, forget this, I'm over watching this, but each of these curves, each of these points is now bounded, and I can change those borders. All right, that's an awful lot to take in about how the tool is used. I suggest we stop now, go and have a cup of tea. I'm going to pause and go and have one, and then we'll come back. We'll actually start playing with the curve. It's a lot easier to just use than to have to explain everything. However, the explanation is necessary, preferably as one-off. And if you didn't quite get it, have your biscuit as well and replay the first half. I'll see you in YouTube in less than 1 second. In real life, I've probably been away for an hour. Well, there you go. An hour turned into a cup of tea, then a nice glass of wine, watch a bit of TV, and back in front of the computer. So here we are with this particular picture, and let's have a look at the color ranges. But first, a little recap. We've got black to white, and we can raise or lower the tones within those bands, and most importantly, we can use this little dropper to actually target particular tones, save us having to work out what actual tone it is, and we just use our eye. Right click, reset all. Now the point curve has 3 color variants. You've got red, which is red and cyan. You've got green, which is green and magenta, and you've got blue, which is blue and yellow. If you've got the basic panel, if you've ever wondered why the temperature goes from blue to yellows, because they're opposites. Similarly, the tint between green and magenta. Lo and behold, down in the tone curve, we've got those same pairings, yellow and blue. If you want to increase the yellows and decrease the blues, you'd come this way. And if you wanted to increase the greens and decrease the magentas, you can come this way, or the other way around. And similarly in red, if you want to add cyan, such as in that sky, and just a tiny little change there made that sky dramatically change, but it did also change a lot of the sand because there is a lot of red in there, and we're taking those reds out. So let's reset them all, and what I want to do here is I want to play with the sky a little bit, but I don't know, well, is that a darker tone than that? Well, let's just use the dropper. So I'm over here, I'm going to come into sky, and I'm going to raise it up just a little bit. Before and after in Lightroom is the backslash key. So if you take that out, you can see just a slight change on the sky, perhaps a little bit more bright in that part. And over on the red, because there's predominantly a lot of red in this, I want to actually darken some of these reds. So I'm actually going to find a dark point, probably around there, and I'm going to pull that down just a little bit, a hair. Now you see that's a bit too sensitive for me, so what we're going to do, float over it and use my downward arrow key. There you go, 3 little dots down, and that's changed that before and after. You can see we're actually taking some of the glow out there, and in doing so we're starting to get more definition in these bits in the background before and after. So very small changes have a big effect, but again, this is global. Let's see what we can do if we start to target these things using masks. And for that, we're going to jump into our last picture, which is this one of the Sage building. It's now called the Glass House something or other, but I will always call it the Sage. Just as a general edit on this, by the way, I think the outline of the building is a little bit lost against the background, so let's very quickly do a radial gradient going behind the Sage, and let's increase the exposure, and then let's subtract the subject, which should be intelligent enough to pick out the Sage, which it has. So if I look at the overlay of my mask, you can see it actually has just left that in behind. So now we've actually done that, we've got the Sage standing out a little bit more. Let's go before and after with the backslash key, because we've just kind of like put a rim light around it. Okay, back to our tone curves. Tone curves didn't used to be part of masking, but now they are. So let us choose sky. Let's just grab the sky with a mask. Now it's also chosen the Sage. We'll forgive it for that for the moment, because that's not what we're looking at. But what we will find though is we have got tone curves. I went sailing past them there. Did you spot that? It's under curve. And here we are. So now we've got the sky. We can still use our little tool to pick the darker parts of the sky, but I can't see the darker parts of the sky, yes, because the overlay is on. So let's switch it off there, or just press the O key for overlay. So let's go into the darker parts of the sky and pull those down a little bit more. Tiny little bit makes a radical difference. And let's go to the highlight, but not the brightest part. And let's just push that up a little bit. So before and after. And we've not only put a highlight around the sage, but we're really getting some drama into that sky. What if we just wanted to do something with the river? Bit of slapdash. Let's go and choose a linear gradient. And let's just drag it up the water. I know that the more recent features in Lightroom will find landscape parts which include water, but it's just a straightforward horizontal, more or less, piece. So let's just stick a linear gradient on, switch the overlay off, and let's brighten up some of these areas in the water. Again, let's just use the dropper and lift that up a little bit, and possibly take the darker parts down a little bit more. There we go, before and after. Now what we've already done here is we've used the tone curve, which was a solitary tool. If we go back to our original, a solitary tool which was global. It impacted every pixel depending on what we're altering, and we've come in here and we've actually now created two separate masks targeting different things, but also have the ability to use the tone control. Lightroom, Adobe rather, putting tone curve into the masks was a great feature. Let's zoom in a little bit on this picture. So let's zoom in on the sage. Whoa. Control plus to get me in a bit closer. And move it up. And let us come in again. Put another mask on this. And I'm going to choose a luminosity here. So I want to choose luminance range. I want to choose the lighter panels in the sage. But it's covered everything. But that's fine because we're going to intersect. All of these were in previous videos as well. The masks are so powerful. But to intersect, I hold my Option or Alt key down. The buttons change to intersect. I click. Intersect with what? Intersect with a brush. And what I'll do is if I just brush here now, then all of those particular luminance values that were highlighted are now only showing where I also brushed. And yes, I spilled over the edge. So let's just quickly hold my Option key down to Alt key, and it becomes a minus sign. I'm in the middle of my brush, and I'll just remove those off the top. Bit slapdash, but because we're just doing little tones and not radical colors, anything will get away with it. Now that is a very good selection for what I wanted in seconds. Now bearing in mind I'm doing this a little bit slower to talk you through it. Once you've done this once or twice, you can do it really quickly. Let's switch the overlay off. Let's go into our tone curve here, and let us choose some of the lighter bits and push them up, and let's choose some of the darker bits of that luminance range and pull them down. So now I've added some targeted contrast control using the tone curve within an element of this picture. Let's just switch that off and let's zoom back out, and the backslash key before and after, and there's our edit. Okay, one thing that you will notice, or you may not have noticed, is when we're in a masks, on the mask and then the tone curve, you don't have the parametric. Whereas when it's global, you've got the parametric. And that's it. That's all I've got for you. It's about experimenting. It's about using the tools to pick things out for you. It's about knowing when to use global and when to use targeted adjustments through masks. And it's about understanding how very, very small changes, as we saw on the previous picture, can make quite a radical change to your pictures. So go easy, use the trick to apply the brakes, use the hover with the arrow keys to get that in, and until the next one, I hope you've clicked on that subscribe button already and rang that bell. And that's me. I'm going to go and have another glass of wine. Bye for now.